Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Manchester is Red podcast, sponsored by NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world. With NordVPN, you only need one account to use it on 10 devices. You can switch your virtual location to pretty much any country in the world, which unlocks a host of good options for you. Cheaper subscriptions by signing up for streaming services in other countries. Get a bit of discount on that Netflix subscription and use it while you're abroad as well to make sure you can still get those channels you need to watch all the live sport or the series you might want. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on a 2-year plan. Use the code Manchester. The link is in the podcast description as well. I'm Tyrone Marshall, hosting today, joined by Samuel Luckhurst. Podcast probably be out a little bit later because we're recording a touch later post Rangers. A lot going on this morning. Samuel, how have you been?
I'm pretty well after last night. It was certainly an exhilarating finale and plenty to go at today, thanks to the. I think it's safe to say there were more than 3,200 or whatever the allocation was of Rangers fans in Manchester, and more than that at Old Trafford as well last night.
Yeah, definitely. It was somewhere between their ticket allocation and the number of fans that came for the Europa League final in 2008, I think. Somewhere between that number. We will get on to that in the second half of this podcast and the situation and the shambles around that. I know it's happened again. First part, we'll try and discuss the game, and it's a win. They won a game, another game. Rangers and Southampton beaten twice within a week. United are back.
Those mighty teams, yes.
Those mighty teams, yes. Southampton and Glasgow Rangers down to Old Trafford in convincing style, I think, on both occasions as well. Absolutely no doubt with either of them. But yeah, I mean, it was it's a big win. I mean, it felt like a vital win, didn't it? One that they needed. They needed to get that win in the back pocket.
Well, you were looking at the table, weren't you, at 0-0 even, and it had United outside the top 8, and they'd have dropped outside the top 8 had they not got that 92nd minute winner. Again, I mean, I was coming out the ground, and a fan recognised me, and he started speaking quite eloquently about it, and just pleased that they'd won, but kind of lamenting another poor performance. I don't think the performance was necessarily poor. They had so many opportunities to kill that game off, but with United that you're always going to have a chance because they don't score goals often enough, and it's very rare if they do put 3 goals past a team, and that's been pretty rare this season. And it almost didn't matter that Rangers had injury issues coming into the game because no team rocks up at Old Trafford with an inferiority complex. And Rangers will have known that they were going to have a pretty impeccable following. I mean, going to these games, I've seen Rangers and Celtic both play at Old Trafford. I've not been to Parkhead or Ibrox for a game in press. And when you experience the atmospheres just from the away end and also in the home section last night, it does make you just pretty desperate for certainly covering United, for United to get an away draw at Celtic or Rangers next season, because I can imagine the atmosphere is on a different level. If Rangers or Celtic are getting to a European final, I think they are a different breed to the other European clubs. I think they would always take more fans than, say, if United were getting to a European final or Liverpool or these other clubs with huge followings across the continent. It is a different form of a different level of fervent following up there. And Rangers, of course, had that. They were let off the hook a couple of times, and they had the opportunity right at the death to get the equaliser. They got it, and then they switched off, and it was a terrifically taken goal by Fernandes. And what I liked about the winning goal, I mean, the finish is impeccable. But just from looking at this United side playing in 3-4-3 or 3-4-2-1, Martinez has got to get forward a lot more often with the ball. We saw against Liverpool, he scored from stepping into the final third. He had a shot in the first half last night that was tipped over from obviously moving into the final third. And he was there or thereabouts to put in that brilliant ball for Fernandes. He's a real attacking asset when he's got that license to go forward. And he should be doing it more often because he's got the safety net of 2 centre-backs playing alongside him and holding the fort. And really, from a selfish perspective, we see that going and we just think, why couldn't you have bloody done that at 1-0 and won 2-0 or 3-0? I mean, my intro, my piece was written after 80 minutes, after 85 minutes still stood. Then it's 88th minute and you think, oh, Christ. And that middle bit or middle chunk focusing, reflecting on the supporters being sprinkled across the home section, that becomes the top line, and that's the focus, because it's another mess at United. It's another disaster class from the club on the pitch and off the pitch. It's a sequel to Galatasaray, and then of course United score a 92nd minute winner. And it's like you don't know what to make of it. It's a good result. It's not necessarily a good performance, but in the grand scheme of things, they're unbeaten in the Europa League. They're fourth in the table. A point should do it against FCSB next week, but there's going to be a lot riding on that game, where FCSB are eighth in the table. So it's obviously going to be I think it'll be it'll be a better game than many anticipated, and I can imagine you're particularly looking forward to it, because obviously you're in Bucharest next week, so there's a lot riding on that match. United are guaranteed to be in Europe beyond this month, but obviously Ruben Amorim is desperate for them to qualify for the round of 16 automatically, so they have those 3 midweeks in February.
Yeah, absolutely. It is going to be a huge game because, like you say, avoiding those February games is massive. Excuse me. And in a way, I mean, the late drama, bad for us, good for neutrals, good for United fans, I think, given the, we kind of joked before the game, hadn't we? The one thing you wanted was Rangers to score when the game was live, just to see how many Rangers fans had actually infiltrated the home end. And we got that. But for United fans, we also got then the sweet revenge of them scoring a winner a few minutes later and silencing them. But it also helped that if United won that game 1-0 with Jack Butland producing his finest contribution to the United cause 18 months after he left the club, it would have been a more negative tone than if they won it 2-1 with a well-created goal late on to win it, because, to beat Rangers with an own goal from a disastrous goalkeeping error wouldn't have looked good. In a way, they kind of needed that, the momentum that a late win brings, but also the fact that they have opened up a team and scored a decent goal to win it.
It would have been quite a humdrum reaction to that win. It would have been an important win if they'd won 1-0. But obviously the takeaway from it would have been, well, last week they only got, against Brighton, they had one attempt on target, which was a penalty, and lost 3-1. Against Rangers, they required, that was my intro. It was along the lines of United fans have become accustomed to seeing their own goalkeepers commit a howler. On this occasion, it was a former United keeper that committed a howler. And that's the way they got the breakthrough. And I thought the disallowed goal in the first half should have stood. I didn't think that was a foul. And it was also inconsistent of the referee, because the nudge by, what's his name? Cyril. What's the surname? Christ. I know he's Cyril because they were singing. Yeah, who got the equaliser. Yeah. It was a similar nudge on Maguire, and you think, well, if you're given a foul for the first half, that should be a foul. I didn't think either of them were a foul, but Maguire should have scored from a free kick. Ugarte should have scored from a free kick. I'm really struggling to recall the last time United created 4 great chances from set pieces in a single game, and they did last night. So that's a measure of progress, and it shows that although they've had a lot of stick, and rightly so, for their set piece defending, Carlos Fernandes is starting to exert some influence there with their set piece routines. That they beat Victoria Pilsen through a set piece, albeit it was a difficult finish for Rasmus Højlund, and he took it well to win that game. So there's progress on that front, and certainly when Manchester United win with a goal in added time, it sets the pulses racing, and it would have been particularly sweet for a lot, just about every fan in the home section last night. I several friends there in different parts of the ground. 2 of them who are brothers. They're very mild mannered, and they've been going to United for like 30 years, whatever it is. And you look at them, and they wouldn't. Let's just say they're never ever going to be members of the Men in Black firm. But when Rangers scored, they did not hold back inventing the Rangers fans in their row who broke ranks. And when Fernandes scored, they actually ran up to these Rangers fans, and I think the polite way of phrasing it is that they told them to do one, but it was teeming with expletives, and that's what would have made it worth it. I mean, there've been some messages exchanged today about the Schadenfreude that Mancunians are enjoying Glaswegians being stuck in the city because of the gales and the trains being cancelled, and possibly them having to fork out inflated prices to have another night in Manchester before they eventually get back north of the border. So in the end, despite the despite the various incidents and the unpleasantness, as I'm sure we'll get onto shortly, United fans did have the last laugh last night.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the set pieces there. It was a good night for Carlos Fernandes, and it did look dangerous from them. The issue again remains creating chances in open play and having someone who can put chances away in open play. I thought Xerxes' link-up play was good. His hold-up play was good. Rarely in the box to finish a chance. He does so much good work away from the box that he just can't be in the box at the same time. And that's kind of a clear issue, but it was a step forward for him again in terms of confidence. But Amad was bright again. Garnacho, we'll kind of come on to a bit more in a minute, had a really good game, I thought. But, it does sum up United's lack of creativity. And you're right, but just to expand on that point, it's notable that Martinez is starting to take up these positions a little bit more. It's a feature of Amorim's sporting team that the centre-backs would get involved in attacks as well. They would put crosses in or break into the area. And we saw Martinez do it at Liverpool when it felt like that was almost a happy accident in a way, that he intercepted the ball and just kind of carried on. But it's almost like that might have given him the belief that, like, right, I can do this. This is what he's asking me to do. And we saw it last night with that good first half shot. The cross, he saw that space and just wandered into it. And we know he's very good on the ball. His passing is up there with the best in the United side. So there's no reason that Martinez on the left and whoever the right centre-back might be, whether it's De Ligt, whether it's Yoro, they've got to kind of add numbers to the attack, haven't they, and get more bodies there and show what they can do in the final third as well.
Yeah, particularly if Fernandes is playing the central midfield as he did last night, and I can see him playing there certainly again between now and the end of the season. Fernandes he's always going to be a little higher up the pitch because that's where he's at his most influential, as he's demonstrated over the past 5 years at the club. So it makes it all the more essential that someone from the back three supplements the midfield and pushes forward. And this formation that Amorim swears by, there have been times where it's looked too rigid when really it should be a lot more fluid. It should be, it should just be 3-4-3 on paper. It should ensure that a defender should be getting forward. Obviously, the wingers or the fullbacks, their roles have changed. Where previously they were, well, certainly in Dallow's case, it was a case of pushing to midfield, sometimes go to the apex of the attack. But I don't see any reason why the front three can't be more fluid. I mean, I think I don't know when the game would come along to trial something, because obviously every game is quite treacherous for United in different ways. But there has to be a point where you maybe experiment without Højlund and Xerxes in the starting 11 and see where that gets you. And that doesn't mean that the centre forward or whoever the full sign is, they stay there, but you possibly rotate. You could have Amad, Garnacho and Fernandes in the front three. And that is quite a daunting front three for a lot of teams to come up against. There's a hell of a lot of quality packed into those three forwards, but whether they could make it work, and of course Amorim is all about, certainly at Sporting, it was provide depth to the striker stays up top, and Victor Gyökeres will get a bag full of goals throughout the course of the season. But United can't really play that way because they don't have the striker to do that. And it has come to the point now with Xerxes where a lot of people will be feeling, he's done very respectfully, and he's come back really well from the dreadful reception he got from some supporters against Newcastle, but he's not scored. He's gone 8 games without a goal. Højlund's gone 10 games without a goal. But it's now at that point where you're thinking, does Højlund come back in the team just to see if something will stick there and he could get a goal, or he might improve things somehow? I think the jury is in on both of them. United don't have a striker who's good enough to be a starting striker, and they need to somehow get by between now and the end of the season and try and have a successful run in. And that's why, certainly the case of Garnacho, I think it'd be scandalous to sell him, because that forward line is light as it is. You can't bank on Mason Mount to come back in and be one of the 2 number 10s, because he's never fit. And so many of those forwards are flaky, and they are reliant on 1 or 2 players at the moment in terms of the goals output. Fernandes, I think, has become a lot. I mean, he's had some extremely influential games in some very big games of late: City away, Liverpool away, Arsenal away, and of course last night with the winner against Rangers. So that, and he's been a brilliant player for United, whatever the caveats. Ahmad is having an exceptional individual season, but it's not always enough. I thought there were times last night when he overplayed it a bit. Maybe the whole thing of coming up against a former club, even though he wasn't there very long and didn't play very much, it can sometimes influence the way a player goes about playing against them when they're in that scenario. But otherwise, Ahmad's been, as I said, he's had an exceptional season. So that is something that Amrim could look at, but he's in an invidious position because we still don't know which players are coming or going. I mean, Rashford was in training on Wednesday, which was not a huge surprise. And then he's not even in a squad where you can pick 23 players. They can have 12 substitutes. I think they had 9 subs last night, with Mazraoui rested as a precaution. And 2 of the subs, as United are prone to doing, were goalkeepers. So that makes it abundantly clear that United are just waiting for him to find a club, Rashford. And I still think that it's likely he will get a loan before the window closes a week on Monday. But it would be no good for anyone if Rashford is a United player still on, it's February the 4th, isn't it? The Tuesday, the day after the transfer deadline. That's one of my bugbears with the Garnacho thing. There's been a lot more noise around Garnacho possibly going than there has been Rashford possibly going, and Rashford is the one who wants to go. And from what I've been told, Garnacho does not want to go.
Yeah, and Garnacho picked a hell of a time to have his best game under Ruben Amorim, didn't he? And I think the most comfortable he's looked under Amorim, I think it was just after the hour mark when bit of skill won a free kick right in front of the Stretford end, who started singing Viva Garnacho.
Yeah.
Amorim was asked about it post-match, and I think his answer was relatively unconvincing. I mean, you were in the press conference, I was in the mix zone, but reading the quotes, he's a player for Manchester United, really important for us today, and let's see in the next days. I mean, it wasn't an unequivocal, he's going nowhere. I think it's fair to say there's clearly interest there. United need to sell to buy, and he's one of the very few sellable assets. But last night was a reminder, wasn't it, that there are inherent risks with selling a player like Alejandro Garnacho. And we've spent a lot of this podcast talking about how short United are of goals. He's 3rd this season for goals and assists in that squad. And it feels like this is a hell of a gamble, isn't it? If United do opt to cash in, it is a hell of a gamble, and they've got to have something lined up to make it worthwhile.
You cannot end a transfer window weaker than you were at the start of it, and that would be the risk, because I have no faith whatsoever in United to go out there and sign a player who is demonstrably better than Garnacho to replace Garnacho. And he was deemed not for sale in the summer. Now he's deemed for sale. That tells you that there's no joined up thinking, no long-term planning, that United are inconsistent. They could be forced into a cut price sale, and they will cite profitability and sustainability rules. They admitted to the 1958 fans group that they are in danger of being in breach of PSR, which we all knew, but they're being transparent with supporters regarding that matter. The talk is that the days where they would spend more than £200 million in a summer transfer window are over, which again isn't as surprising. And there are different definitions of that in terms of what you pay up front, the cost of a player spread over years, whether it's done in installments and what have you. But regarding Garnacho, I mean, I know that it's the CIES Football Observatory. It can come out with some utterly unfathomable figures regarding valuations. They had Hoyland down as United's most valuable player recently. It's something like 90 odd million euros. I mean, no, he's not worth that, and United would probably accept a third of that to sell him if it wasn't for PSR and this amortization calculation. So they would be suffering a loss on him. But Garnacho is a sellable asset, and that's why United are receptive to letting him go if a certain figure is hit. But it just smacks of desperation that they would be in that position now, and clearly they didn't do enough due diligence, I think, when regarding the financial situation, when they go from absolutely, it's one opposite, it's going from one extreme to the other within the case of within 6 or 7 months that Garnacho is not for sale, and then suddenly he is effectively for sale, and every United player is for sale if a certain price is hit. But United are going to be, when push comes to shove, it'll be interesting to see what they do, because we've seen it happen so often with teams that towards the end of a transfer window, a club will yield, or a club will blink first regarding negotiations, and they can end up looking pretty daft as a consequence of it. I can see it from both sides. You can look at Garnacho and think he's a winger. The way this United team play, Amorim wants 4 backs on the wing. He's not going to play Garnacho there. I fully understand that. Is Garnacho a number 10? No, he isn't outright. So if there's good money on the table and you can buy a player who's more compatible for the team, then that's a reasonable argument. Yet this is a player who's had a pretty terrific nearly 2.5 years in the Manchester United first team. I thought he was their best player of the year last season. He's still their second top scorer for this season. He played very well last night. He had a good contribution against Arsenal and Liverpool recently as a substitute and as a starter. He's only 20. He will get better. He could be a world beater. He's absolutely not a player that they should be entertaining offers for, whoever the coach is. And also, if you get back into this modus operandi of, he's not compatible with the way the coach wants to play, then you're doing what you did under Ten Hag, because you're signing players for the coach rather than the club. And I go back to what I asked Ratcliffe in February last year about the style, who's going to decide it, what style do you want to play? And he said, we'll decide the style of play. The chief executive, the technical staff will decide on that style, and the coach will play that style. It is the very opposite of that now. United are playing a style set by the coach, and it could work, and I hope it works for their case under Ruben Amorim, because there's a lot about Amorim that I like. I think we've all been impressed by him, and I think that if he's given the right parts and pieces, he can succeed. But they've got to get that balance right of recruitment. It's no good just jettisoning every winger that United have developed in their academy when the guy could get sacked in a year or two time. I mean, look at the shelf life of Manchester United managers in the past 11 or 12 years. It's around about 2.5 years, and you've got to have a consistent strategy. And clearly, Garnacho has proved that they don't have a consistent strategy.
Yeah, I think that's the real risk here, isn't it? That, like I say, we all hope Amorim succeeds. Believe it or not, we are all fed up of reporting on managerial changes at United and the chaos at United. It would be nice for a period of success, but if it doesn't work, then there's no way they're getting another manager that plays a back three, because there's so few that do at elite level. And if in 18 months, 2 years, they do have to change and they go to someone who plays a back four and wingers, and Garnacho's at Chelsea or Napoli or has moved on to Real Madrid and is looking one of the best wingers in Europe, it's going to look incredibly bad for United. They are throwing all their eggs in with Amorim, and you hope for many reasons that it works, and that is one of the biggest, really, that it would be disastrous, really, if they do build an entire squad for a back three and wing backs. And Garnacho might well end up being the victim of that he's not a ready-made number 10 at the moment. Perhaps he could be a project player for Amorim, but you get the impression that United haven't really got time for project players at the moment, and that cashing in is something that's clearly been strongly considered. That's all for the first part. We're back after the break to look ahead to Fulham, but also discuss the chaos inside Old Trafford last night. Welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast then. A similar story at Old Trafford last night to Galatasaray at home last season, apart from the fact that United won this game and lost that one. It felt like it only really became apparent that night that there was thousands of Galatasaray fans in the home end then. It only really felt like it became apparent to me anyway when the game was over, to be honest. I didn't really notice it during the game. Yesterday it was very, very obvious. Most obvious of all with the fact that there must have been 100 Rangers fans in the seats right next to the away end in East Stand or K Stand. And I mean, it's just a disastrous look for United, isn't it? I mean, they promised another investigation. They investigated after Galatasaray. Clearly nothing's been done. God knows what this investigation is going to deliver. But it's a terrible look. And the fact that a group of fans that big have managed to get a block of tickets together like that, some serious questions need to be asked of what is going on here.
Well, I asked one friend who was there last night whether were there more Rangers fans than there were Galatasaray fans, and he said what you just said, that because Turkish fans don't really drink, and obviously Scottish fans do drink quite. Yeah, but I don't think we'll get group libel on this. Yeah,
no, definitely accurate.
Yeah, so where Turkish fans are more reserved, they didn't break ranks until after full time, where Galatasaray had won, and they wanted to essentially try and congregate with the away section to celebrate a famous victory. The stewards at Old Trafford last night would have been praying for a clean sheet more than Altay Bayindir, and essentially the only way that could have been worse was had Rangers made it 1-0 in the 88th minute. It was bad enough that it was an 88th minute equaliser, because as soon as that went in, you knew. I think we said we've even got our phones out here just to see where the pockets of home section, where it's going to kick off. Because, as I said, I've been to see United Celtic at Old Trafford, and when Celtic went 1-0 up in 2006, it just sounded the bell for round one for there to be dust-ups in several blocks around the stadium, because there were loads of Celtic fans in the home section. And last night, it was that away end was effectively expanded, because on either side of the student segregation, you just had these, and you could point them out because they were clapping. The choreography of their clapping matched what was going on in the away end. There were dashes of blue as well, so you think, well, it looks like they're Rangers fans, but they're on either side. We looked up just behind us around the corner, and they were stood up there as well. And on the other side of it, they were in the K Stand, which is obviously a stronghold of United fans at Old Trafford. I suppose you could regard it as one of the more militant areas of the ground, but there were several Scots in there who were treating the home section like their home, as if it was Ibrox. And then, of course, I'm sure everybody has seen lots of videos that fans have taken from several different parts of the ground. I mean, I must have spoken to about half a dozen friends, maybe more, who were there last night, all of them in pretty different sections, whether it was the North Stand, that first tier of the East Stand of K Stand, or the Stretford end as well. One female friend, she admitted she got smacked on the head, albeit that was an accident, and after Bruno Fernandes scored, and it was by a United fan. So I think at least she came out of it relatively unscathed. Another female friend who was in the Stretford end said she must have been surrounded by 6 Rangers fans. So it wasn't just a case of Rangers fans getting tickets as close as possible to the away section. I was told that some of those sections, they're hospitality, and that's a UEFA thing, and that's something that UEFA are going to have to change. If they're giving hospitality tickets out to away fans that are effectively in a home section, that just doesn't compute. That's totally illogical, especially when it's to British clubs with certainly if you take Rangers and put them at any British club, it is likely to kick off, whether it's the tamest set of supporters in the land, or whether it's Man United or Liverpool or another big European club that are competing in European competition. And it's pretty scandalous that it's been allowed to happen again. I mean, I've done a piece on it this morning, and of course, United said that their online ticketing database was set up partly to try and tackle touts But two friends said last night, all you have to do is take the screenshot, and it does the trick. Touts have become quite sophisticated as well, of being able to formulate their own screen QR codes, apparently. So they double as tickets. And it just seems like everybody of United persuasion who was there last night has got a horror story to tell from it. I mean, I was told that one lady who's been going to United games for 33 years and has had that seat for 33 years came to it and found two Rangers fans stood in it. Now, if two Rangers fans were stood in my seat, I'd hesitate about asking them to please mind out the way. I mean, what you said was interesting, where your friend was sat or stood, like how Rangers fans were congregating around one of the blocks, which is obviously the exit and the entrance. And I think my friend is stood in that section as well. And he said normally he goes downstairs for a pint at half time. He said he don't go down there just because it was swarming with Rangers fans. There've been, I think there were multiple ejections at half time. I mean, looking at GMP's statement this morning, it's tragicomic almost. Like, it's titled "Officers Deployed Across the City to Keep Thousands Safe at Old Trafford last night." From a policing perspective, the facilitation of the fixture went to plan, with the majority being able to focus on the football. Well, yes, I suppose the majority are when you've got 73,000 fans in there, but there were a lot of people in that stadium last night that felt unsafe, and people have sent us messages today saying that they saw children crying and that they got hit accidentally or not. That one of my friends said that he was glad he didn't take his nephew to it as well. And look, football is going to be tribal, and it's going to be quite, it's going to get edgy at times, but you shouldn't have brazen away supporters in home sections. And it was rife last night, and it only seems, look, I know it's happened before at other grounds and it will continue to happen, but it has happened pretty publicly at United 2 seasons running against two teams with extremely fervent followings in Galatasaray and Rangers. And it was probably worse last night. I think there was certainly a lot more violence last night than the Galatasaray game, because as I just said, the Galatasaray fans, despite their dreadful history in some incidents, coming up against English teams, most traumatically what happened when the two Leeds fans were killed in 2000. Although it could have got quite leery, it seemed quite calm because they broke ranks after full time, and United fans wanted to get out of the stadium because they'd just seen their team lose from being 2-1 up. Whereas last night it did properly kick off. I mean, Darren Fletcher got out of dodge, didn't he, after Rangers equalised? I mean, he's a Scot as well, so he's bound to know, but he left his seat and he possibly missed Bruno Fernandes' winner as he was walking through the corridors back to the dressing room.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned hospitality there. There's the screenshots doing around this morning of Rangers selling hospitality tickets back in September, I think, that included a seat on the halfway line in the Sir Alex Ferguson stand. Obviously, you've got this group as well next to the away end. I mean, my friend that you've just referenced was basically stood right next to him. I messaged him about 7:45, 7:50 last night, and he replied saying, "Yeah, there's a few scarves near us." Then a few minutes later said, "Actually, scratch that. There's Rangers everywhere," and sent a picture during a song and basically said everyone with their hands in the air isn't a United fan. And he did go down at half time, but said it was clearly going to kick off down there. I think he asked the police at the time, like, "Why are you doing nothing?" And they've said it's easier to manage this way. And he said, "Well, it's going to kick off." And sure enough, it did. And his response was
that tallies with what some friends told me about, like going up to police and essentially asking the same question. The police saying, "Look, we're not going to do anything unless it really escalates." Yeah. And boy, it wasn't a case of the words of Romberg, and boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, you could see it was going to escalate from before kickoff.
Yeah, you really could. And then, United sent a few notes, a bit of a statement around last night, kind of promising this investigation. But they
sent seconds after Fernandes scored.
After Fernandes scored, yes.
Strategically,
what a time to bury bad news. Yeah, absolutely. And it includes the unauthorised touting of tickets become more difficult since under instruction in app digital. It cannot be completely eliminated, which, I guess you're never going to properly eliminate ticket touts, but no other club seems to have this problem with away fans in the home end. I mean, it's happened twice now at United in successive years. Other clubs have had big games in that time and not had home ends infiltrated. I mean, it's just another appalling look for Manchester United, isn't it? And, we go back to it, and United haven't answered this question yet. How can a group of Rangers fans essentially get 50, 60, 70 tickets next to each other in a block? I mean, that can't be all of those fans have touted their ticket. I mean, there's something else going on there, surely, that United have sold them as a block, sold them as hospitality. Something, we're speculating here, but something must have gone wrong. And it feels typical of the way this football club is run at the moment, that for the second year in a row, they're saying, oh, yeah, we can't eliminate this properly. We've tried, It's just not really good enough, is it?
No, it isn't. And I was told last night that very senior figures at the club who are obviously heavily involved in supporter services or certainly ticketing arrangements were actually perplexed that there were so many Rangers fans in the home section. But look, just speaking from fans, people on the ground, people who buy tickets, people who've encountered ticket touts, I learned more from them than I probably would have done just going to the club and having another conversation this morning after the notes they sent last night. And you're never going to stop it. I mean, when you go to Wembley, obviously, if you get the tube there, Wembley Park, you walk down the steps and you go under that underpass onto Wembley Way. At the start of it, you are met with ticket touts. They are the first people you encounter other than supporters. And feet away are police officers who do absolutely nothing about it. Ticket touting is ostensibly illegal, but it continues to go on. It will always go on. I've personally never bought off a ticket tout. My father has in the past sometimes, but that's there's always a market for it because there are always people who want a ticket for a certain game, and it's a convenient way of doing it. And if you've got the money and if you're prepared to do it, then a fan is always going to do it. And some fans don't even think twice about how inflated the price could be for a ticket to get into a game, especially if it's a big game like last night's. But United, again, they are the club where anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and it isn't good enough. Sometimes they can offer as much context as possible, and I get that there's a new way of distributing tickets through their online database and this, that, and the other. But a lot of United fans were effectively accusing the club of being touts, and in the past there have been cases where players have touted tickets, or family members of players touting tickets, and everybody knows they do it. And it's happened quite recently as well. Everyone knows they do it, but obviously you can't. It's extremely difficult to prove in those circumstances, and fans are not necessarily going to be telling tales or grassing on them. Particularly if they're actually buying tickets of them, even though they might not like what they do, they'll still possibly go along with it because they use them for means of getting into grounds for certain games. So it's just if you wanted to do a thread of everything that's gone wrong at Manchester United since they last won the title in 2013, I think you wouldn't have enough memory space, however powerful your laptop or computer was.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't help that this happened on the same day that, you mentioned the letter the club sent back to the 1958 in the first half that mentioned PSR. That letter ostensibly replied to a concern about ticket price rises mid-season that we've seen, and concerns that ticket prices will go up next season. I think anyone worried about ticket prices going up would have read that letter and will be more worried rather than less worried now. I think it's fair to say it certainly seemed to signal a direction where ticket prices are going to go up, regardless of where this team finishes in the league. I think that, reading between the lines, that looks pretty likely. But going back to matters on the pitch, then Fulham away on Sunday evening. 7 league wins for United this season now. I still just find absolutely mind-blowing that we're near the end of January and it's 7 Premier League wins. In the notes for this section, I've put Fulham, can they win it? Which just seems a remarkable thing to write. But I look at it and I just think, I'd genuinely be surprised if United win that game on Sunday night, and that just kind of feels where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously both going down for it, and they'll have a great following in the Putney end, as they always do. United for a scandalous kickoff time. It should be illegal, 7 p.m. on a Sunday for a Northwest club going down to West London. It's just appalling of TNT. They're showing the game. They're the ones who are shafting fans. It is important to ram that point home as often as possible, because it's utterly unacceptable. We keep on saying the same thing and nothing changes, and unfortunately I don't think anything ever will change on that front. But as far as that game is concerned, Fulham will go into this game having not played in 8 days. Since they last played, United have played twice. Fulham played last Saturday at Leicester, which at the moment for most teams is as easy as a game as you can have, really. And United played twice and had two pretty grueling games, whether it be just how shattering it was to lose 3-1 at home to Brighton for a second season running, or that heart-stopping finish against Rangers where they required a 92nd minute winner. So Fulham will be the fresher team. They'll have had 8 days to prepare. Fulham are above United in the table. Fulham are a good side. Every game that United go into, it's treacherous, and this one is certainly no exception. It is I mean, tricky doesn't really do that. Does Fulham a disservice? It feels like they've got a lot going for them, and having been a bit of a yo-yo club for a couple of years now, they're under Marco Silva. You always expect them to stay up unless something drastically changes there for the worse. They'll be a well-established Premier League team for a long time. And as you said, you don't have any faith in United to get a result here. I think the only thing that could be in United's favour is that it's an away game, because Amram has spoken ad nauseum about how difficult United have found playing at Old Trafford, and they've lost 4 of their past 5 Premier League games at Old Trafford. He's spoken about the anxiety they feel there, the nervousness they feel there. It's the absolute opposite of a fortress. So perhaps that could help them this weekend, where they're playing at Craven Cottage, and we've seen how well they've done in recent away games against Arsenal and Liverpool, which were, of course, far more seismic fixtures in terms of the significance and the rivalries with those teams. I mean, Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester United are the 3 biggest clubs in England, 3 biggest clubs in Britain, and clearly coming up against those opponents, United lifted their performance level. It's not quite the case at Fulham, but Amram did signpost some selections last night by making 5 changes, and you would expect Mainu, Ugarte, probably Maguire as well, and probably Onana. From what he said in the embargoed section, he maintained that it was rotation that they were prepared to give Bayindir his opportunity against Rangers. Yet it did feel somewhat significant, because Bayindir had not played in Europe for United before last night. He played quite well against Rangers as well. And certainly from speaking to my United supporting friends, I think the majority of them would rather Bayindir start against Fulham on Sunday than Onana. But from what Amram told us after the match last night, it sounds like Onana will be back in. So it will be another fascinating game. It will be, an interesting drive there for us, an interesting drive back as well, I'm sure, whatever the result. I don't envisage it being uneventful. And United, on their past 2 visits to Craven Cottage, they got added time winners. So it is a ground where they've had some pretty great finales, whether it was Ronaldo in 2007 or more recently Garnacho in 2022 or Bruno Fernandes last season, and they were not in a good place going into that game either.
No, absolutely. That's reason for hope. And like you say, the fact it's an away game, I think, does give them maybe more of a chance if it's at Old Trafford. And like you say, I'm sure it will not be quiet. We will both be there. So stay tuned to the MEN over the weekend for all the build-up and the action from Craven Cottage. And then we'll be back with you for a podcast on Monday. For now, leave us a review, a like. Remember to subscribe to get the latest podcasts in your feed. And that's all for now. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you all on Monday.